All right, so welcome everyone to our first August ELD check-in for 2024. Hope everyone's off to a great school year. Today we're going to be talking about EL screening and identification, and I'm also going to share with you some recent research in a study done by the Department of Education. So we'll go ahead and get started. So as always, we have our community agreements. We're trusting in the good intentions, staying engaged. Feel free to speak your truth, bring your identity, but we may not have closure on everything, but that's okay. We'll keep the discussion going later on. All right, so I am going to put the link to, our note taker in the chat. Get that going here. If I can. Well, getting the link and not the thing. Okay. I'm gonna get the link here and I'll put it in the chat so you'll have it. You can sign in. So you are an editor on this so that you can type on the document. Go. That is in the chat. And if one of my mail people would post that again as other people come in, I would appreciate it. So let me go back to my main screen here. There we go. So again, the note taker link is in there. If you would please sign in so we know who's present today. And again, welcome to our first check-in of 2024. I'm going to be sharing some DESE and WIDA and OELA updates the first, and then we'll talk about the screening and identification process and then that research. At the bottom of the screen there is our link to the ELD webpage where you can find all kinds of information about English language development if you're new to the field. And underneath that, there's a link to the check-in hub where you can sign up for future PD or look back at some of our older PD that we've done in our check-ins. So that's always available to you. We record all of these check-ins and you can go back and watch them at your own leisure. All right. As always, we start with our commitments to English learner success. Today, we're going to be talking more about having well-prepared and responsive educators with the resources they need, using some meaningful and rigorous learning opportunities to build on our English learners' assets, supporting their academic and linguistic needs, and hopefully getting them ready to graduate and have a life in the community. And you can, again, there's a link at the bottom where you can look more deeply into our commitments for English learner success. So we'll start with some WIDA updates. There is a new WIDA alternate access that came out this last year. If you need to read more about that, maybe you have some students who will need that alternate access this year. You can go to the link that's provided there to learn more about that. Alternate access scores and reports should be coming out soon or already coming out to you. So this gives you a little bit of information on how to interpret those scores and reports. So we have a link there. There's a glossary that was put out by Altella that describes some of the wording that you will find in those reports. And then this next link is to a family engagement document from WIDA. The next one is the redesigned kindergarten access, which will be coming out in 2025-26. And WIDA is looking for some people to participate in some field study and some other information. I'll share in a moment about that. There is also this really nice video, What to Know, WIDA Assessments in 24-25 school year. Oh, this one is the article that tells you what you can expect with our new assessments and what to look for, and some other information from WIDA. This next,
do you want to share the screen or you want me to share the slides?
Pardon me?
Sorry, I don't know if you're going through a presentation or do you?
Is it not on the screen?
It's not showing on my end. I don't know if it's showing on
Thank you
everybody
for
else's.
letting me know. When I went to the other, it must have just kicked me off. Let me go back there.
Because we're here talking about points, but I'm like, I don't see
Yeah.
them.
Okay, let me share my screen here. Thank you for letting me know, Guadalupe. There we go. Now do you see it?
Yes, now we can see it. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Well, anyway, there's all of these links that you can click on from the slides. Tomorrow, let's see, the 28th, that's in 2 days, from 10 to 11:15. WIDA's putting on a free webinar that you can view about access or alternate access. Which one should you give your students? So you can register through the link that's provided here. And then if you haven't signed up to go to Pennsylvania for the annual WIDA conference, it is full, but they do still have some virtual space available. And they are actually even having a giveaway if you want to register for the virtual conference. So there's a link for that there. Another update from WIDA is in regards to the WIDA model. They're moving the WIDA model to a new platform in 2025. It will still be the same platform, the same information. It's just going to be it's just going to be hosted by Pearson. So you'll find it on a different platform. And this link that says Pearson here will take you to more information about that. Then Advancing Altella has more information on the new WIDA alternate screener that is coming out. So not only do we have a new assessment for alternate, we have a new screener for the alternate assessment as well. That's coming out in 25-26. And there is a link here that can take you to more information about that so that you can stay in the know as it's developing. All right. Here's what I was talking about with the kindergarten access field test. So they're looking for 2,000 English learners in kindergarten and 2,000 English learners in first grade to participate in their field test for 2025. And they're saying that they will provide $100 per student for participation. So if you're interested in signing up to participate in the field test, again, there's a link here on the screen that you can click on for more information. They said that they will be contacting selected applicants on a rolling basis until they reach the number that they need through August and September. So if you're interested, click that link and sign up. We did have some people participate in the alt access field test. So hopefully we can get some people in the screener access as well. Then Education Week. This is the video I was talking about a second ago. They produced this really well done video that walks you through the access for EL's assessment. You could share this with classroom teachers or administrators so that they could be in the know on how our assessment works and what's involved with it. But that's available. Again, it's very well done and produced by Education Week. And then this next one is just a focus bulletin that came out from WIDA. This one's from Plano Early Learning, showing how educators, families, and communities collaborated together for their students. It was a very inspiring article that provided some background and some ideas on how you can work with your English learners. Another one from Minnesota's TESOL, Hetzel Ashler, I think that's how you say her name. She is she was a former literacy teacher and EL teacher, and she has created a article for TESOL and WIDA. Then the next one, in case you missed it, there's a focus bulletin on inclusive reading practices for English learners from examples from inside the classroom. And then this new document from WIDA just came out, having to do with English learners who are blind, visually impaired, or deaf or hard of hearing. So some administration guidance and some specific tools and resources for working with those students. That's found in the WIDA Secure portal. And that link will take you there. Then from OELA, some new things that have just come out from them. The economic benefits of bilingualism is a really nice infographic that they put together. Again, their family toolkit, they've just recently revised, and it's a great resource to use with teachers and with families. And then English learners and oracy is the next article that was very well written. English learners who are Indian or Alaskan natives, it gives you some information on working with that group of students. And then WestEd has a new webinar series that's free to the public for 2024 and dealing with English language learners as well. And I put that link there for you as well. The last one there is a webinar from WIDA that again is at no cost. It is on reading instruction with multilingual learners. So if you're interested in that, you can click on that link. Right, now we're on to the DESE updates. So many of you are aware that Drew Lincoln is no longer with DESE. And I've recently been told that he is not going to be replaced, but Sean Bates, who is our assessment director coordinator for the Office of Assessment, is going to take on his role as well as myself. So we're splitting the job between the two of us. So any questions that you have directly related to assessment and English language learners, you can send to Sean Bates, or you can send some to me. And if I can't answer them, then I will send them to Sean. But either way, we will meet those needs. Another question that's come up a lot is in regards to the EL indicator. And I had a meeting with our Office of Quality Schools to discuss the EL indicator and any updates to it. Even though our CSIP plan and our ESSA plan have been updated, there is going to be no change to the EL indicator at this time. So anything that that you'd be needing with regards to the EL indicator or any questions that you need for clarification, I was told to have you contact the Office of Quality Schools, and they would be happy to answer any questions you have about the EL indicator. Which kind of brings me to the next point here. So coming to the state's data dashboard, I'm going to be working with the Office of Educator Quality to create a profile page, a dashboard for English learners for our state that answers some of these questions and gives you some of the data that you would need for determining your EL indicator. So that's something that's going to be coming soon. We're in the process of deciding what needs to be on that page or what might be valuable to school districts and schools as far as information that they might want to have or might need. So if you have input in that, anything that you think you would like to have on a dashboard of type, let me know. So you can click on this link here that takes you to our state data dashboard that we have in place now and see if there's anything in that that you feel would be beneficial to have specific information on English learners. All right. Another tool that I wanted to share with you is this MoDVT. I don't know if you're familiar with this new tool that we have on our DESE website, but it gives you a picture of student progress over time for each district and each school. And if you have a local sign-in, if you sign up and are able to, you can actually look at individual student data for your students only. So you can't see anybody else's or any other school's data, but you can see your own school's data if you have an account with MoDVT. So I invite you to look at that and find out more about that. And then this is another question we've been getting quite a bit the last few weeks. I contacted WIDA and I contacted Sean Bates. And so we have now our Access 24-25 schedule. So I don't know that this has been posted on the website yet, but it will be available to you in this slideshow. So you can go back to it and find out what dates are in place for this school year. There is that. Some events that we have going on in the state for English learners and EL educators. We have our Southwest Male Conference in Springfield. Again, there are links here for registering for these. Interfaces coming up in Tantera. We do have some EL components in that. In Kansas City, Dr. Izquierdo is going to be presenting on narratives and norms, teaching students from diverse cultures. You can register there. Then we have two WIDA events that are going to be taking place in October. October 7th and 21st is a two-part series on when language and disability meet. So working with dually identified English learners. These are both free to whomever wants to sign up, but there is a limit to the number of seats available. So kind of first come, first serve. And you sign up for those on the DESE curriculum calendar. That's at the bottom of the page linked here. Then November 18th and 19th is our Federal Programs Conference. We'll have an EL component to that as well. In February, we have Boosting Achievement with Carol Salva, again in Kansas City. And then in March, there's the ELE conference in Springfield, and Andrea Hunginsfield is going to be our keynote there. Then June 3rd and 4th will be the Elevate conference at Fort Zumwalt West High School. So we invite you to attend as many of those events as you are able. Our check-ins for this year. So this month, we're doing the screening and identification. In September, we're going to be talking about using access data for instructional decision-making. We're also going to talk a little bit about portfolios and when those are appropriate and how we can use all of this to plan for graduation. Then in October, we're going to be having those two WIDA workshops, so we will not have a check-in in October. In November, we'll talk about newcomers and SLIFE. In January, our programs and LAU plan review. February, English learners with disabilities. In March, we're going to talk a little bit about those nearly proficient English learners, those high intermediate students, and what we can be doing with them in the classrooms and how we should serve them. Then in April, we're going to talk about family engagement planning for the next school year. And in May, talk about analyzing our access growth. And again, hopefully we'll have an update to our EL indicator at that time. So that's the plan for check-ins for this year. Don't forget that we do have self-paced WIDA e-learning modules that are available to any and every educator here in Missouri. All you have to do is check with your test coordinator. They should be able to give you access to that. And if not, you can contact me and I'm happy to sign you up so that you or anyone in your district can access these. Here's a listing of what's available. There's a flyer link at the top there that will give you more detailed information about each of those if you're interested. So that's available. And then I wanted to share with you some demographic information. So I've shared this chart before. Since 2010, we have pretty much doubled how many English learners we have in our state. They're now a little bit over 5% of our student population. As of June until yesterday, a few days ago, Friday, I had approved 120 newcomer screeners. So if you send me a newcomer screener and it takes me a little bit to get back to you, I've been approving several of them in the last couple of days. So I'm working through some every day. But that means we have 120 brand new to US non-English speakers enrolled in our schools in just a couple of days. And it continues to grow. I got more today. Then we got back our results from Access, the numbers, and we tested in 2024 40,977 students. So this number of 39,739 from 2023 has grown to 40,977 last year. And those students were in 291 of our LEAs out of 550. So they're not in every school district yet, but they are continuing to move into all of them. Oh, there we go. All right, on to identification and placement. So first, I wanted to start out with this definition of what is an English language learner. So when we're talking about our ELs, it has to be someone between the age of 3 and 21 who's either enrolled or getting ready to enroll in elementary school or secondary school, who was either, and so I highlighted these words with green and made them bolder because they're important. So they were not born in the United States or whose native language is other than English, or is a Native American or Alaskan Native, or a native resident of an outlying area. And, so this is an and, they have to also have this, and who comes from an environment where a language other than English has a significant impact on the individual's level of English language proficiency, or who is migratory, whose native language is a language other than English, and who comes from an environment where a language other than English is dominant. And then we have another and whose difficulties in speaking, reading, writing, or understanding the English language may be sufficient to deny the individual the ability to meet the challenging state academic standards, the ability to successfully achieve in a classroom where the language of instruction is English, or the opportunity to participate fully in society. So those ands and ors are really important when we're looking at who is an English language learner. And sometimes we can rule out some of the students on the language use survey who don't fit this definition when they're enrolling. So when they answer with yes on one of those questions, this is a good thing to go back to and look at. And we're going to talk a little bit about the language use survey a little bit further on. And then the purpose of all of this is outlined in this document here. I can't remember what it's called all of a sudden. The English Language Acquisition and Language Enhancement and Academic Achievement Act. There we go. So this just basically tells us why we identify the students and why it's important that we test them and have a program in place for them. And I'll let you read through that on your own. So this next part is what's really important and kind of gets to, again, to the language use survey. So under section 3113B2 of ESEA and part of ESSA, each state education agency who receives Title III funding, Part A, must establish and implement a standardized statewide entrance and exit procedure for English learners and conduct timely and meaningful consultation with LEAs representing the geographic diversity of our state. That's kind of what we're doing today. But the requirement that the procedures be statewide means we have to do this across the state. And that's why we developed the language use survey. It's something that needs to be used consistently across our state. It's a federal requirement. And so our language use survey basically has 3 questions, and we'll look at those a little bit more in depth here in a moment and talk more about that. But we have some state-specific guidance as far as the identification and placement of our English learners. And this is updated every year. The top here is a link to this document that spells all of this out. And what I have on the slides here comes directly from this document. So state guidance states that you have to identify potential English learners during enrollment using the language use survey. And any student who is identified through the language use survey as a potential English learner must be screened within 30 days to determine if they're eligible for EL services. And then after we screen them, we have to notify parents or guardians of the results of that assessment within 30 days. And if they qualify, we identify them and code them in our Moses data. Okay. So here's the language use survey questions. We have to have at least these 3 questions to be in compliance. The first question is, what was the student's first language? The second, which language does a student use or speak at home with others? And which language does the student hear at home and understand? So if the student answers any of those 3 questions with something other than English, that identifies them as a potential English language learner. And then what we hope will happen is that you use the language use survey questions that were in that document to ask further questions and find out more. You can also have an interview with the parents to find out more. And this will eliminate that misidentification that sometimes happens. Sometimes we get parents who will say, yes, there's a language spoken in the home, and they're talking about, well, yeah, they sat down as a family and watched Dora Explorer, and they all learned a little bit of Spanish, but that wouldn't qualify them as an English language learner. Or maybe grandma comes to visit and stays with them for an extended time, and grandma only speaks another language, but the child really hasn't learned another language. They just know a few words that they can use to communicate with grandma. So there are different situations we want to take into consideration. So when you answer these first 3 questions, it's good to answer the rest of the questions, or ask and answer the rest of the questions in that language use survey to get a better picture of whether or not the student really is a potential English learner, or if we can eliminate some of them before we have to go through the screening process. Okay. So when we take the assessment, we have a state-approved assessment that has to be used. This is the only one that will qualify the student for services. So in kindergarten, we have a WIDA screener for kindergarten. And in kindergarten, first semester, they only take the listening and speaking domains. They're not usually prepared to take the full battery. If you get a student that comes in that maybe they're repeating a grade, or they've had schooling, intensive preschool, and they learned how to read and they're doing really well, you can give them the whole battery if you wish to. It's locally done. It's fine if you want to do that, but you're only required to give the listening and speaking. And the listening and speaking will identify them as English learners or not English learners. Unless you give the full battery, though, the listening, speaking, reading, and writing, you cannot say that they aren't English language learners. So there's kind of a tricky thing with kindergarten at the first quarter. So unless you give all 4 domains, you can't exclude someone from services. All right, so second semester kindergarten through first semester first grade, you also give the kindergarten screener, but you give all 4 domains. And then for second semester first grade through 12th grade, they take the WIDA screener online. We do not have a paper screener option for second semester, first grade through 12th grade. All right. We also have something in place for newcomer students, and we're defining those as students who are recently arrived immigrants, migrants, or refugees in first grade through 12th grade. So this does not apply to kindergartners. So in first grade through 12th grade, if they're brand new to the country, they've been here for less than 4 months, and they have no exposure to the English language, you can give them or use the DESE EL newcomer kit or newcomer screener. And it's just a form to fill out. You ask, I think there are 5 questions that you ask the student to try to or attempt to answer. You score that. If they qualify, you send that to me and I will approve those and send them back, telling you whether or not they have to take the screener. So if they meet the qualifications of the newcomer kit, you're done. You don't have to screen them. They qualify as an English learner based on this newcomer kit. If they did not meet the criteria for the newcomer kit, they would have to be screened by the WIDA screener. Okay. So what qualifies them? Using the WIDA screener for kindergarten, the oral language score of less than 5.0 would identify them as LEP RCV in your student information system, and they would be placed in your program. Students who score 5 or higher are not required to be put in your EL program, but you still identify them as LEP RCV, and they have to take the access test during our testing window to take that full battery. So again, I said earlier, you can't exclude them from services just based on the listening and speaking test. They have to take all 4 domains. So that's why they have to take the access. So they get all 4 domains in, and we have a full battery to make that determination. So that's with kindergarten. Second semester kindergarten through
Hey,
first.
Cammie,
Oh, go ahead.
can I interrupt with a question?
You certainly may.
Um, so I think my main question is I want to know, do other states do the same thing with their first semester kindergartners where they just take listening and speaking and then everyone takes access? Or is Missouri unique to that? Mostly, I think it's kind of weird, and I want to know if lots of other states do this or not.
It is a practice that's carried out in other states as well. Yes. And mostly because the nature of the test, and we know that kindergartners coming in aren't going to be able to really complete that writing and reading assessment. Again, like I said, if you think that there's a possibility they may do well on it, you can give them all 4 domains. It's not something that we really come around and check. So
Yeah.
if it's going to give you a better picture of where your students are, you can go ahead and do that. But yes, other states do it the same way. There are very few that give the full battery at the beginning of kindergarten.
So I guess the procedure then would be when I get my results in late May or something, kindergartners who scored 4.7 overall would then be coded NLP. Is that right?
Right. They'll be exited and they'll be on monitors still yet.
Why would they be monitored?
Well, because they were initially identified as being an English language learner. Most of them, that will be the end of it, but you still need to make sure that there aren't language interferences that will come into play.
Well, not to be devil's advocate or anything, but I think if we cannot identify until you do all 4 domains, and we cannot do all 4 domains until access, then we are basically, they were not identified as English learners initially, And so the 4.7 should say you are not an English learner and not put them on monitor. I would say.
Yeah.
I don't
But
who am I?
they've taken the listening and speaking. If they didn't score a 5.0 in listening and speaking, there's some delay there. I mean, there's
Well,
some.
what about the students who did score 5.0 on listening and speaking?
If they scored 5.0, I could understand your statement then, yes, and I might agree with you there.
All right. It's just the weirdest thing. And so
I agree.
I'll leave it alone. But
I agree. But I think
Alright.
this was the best they could do for the group of students. Yeah.
And I'd
Okay.
like to follow up on that. This is Lisa Carson.
Uh-huh.
If I administer all 4 parts of the kindergarten, say they get a 5.0 on the first 2, I go ahead and give the reading and the writing and they score. I can mark them as NLP and they don't have to take the access. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. If
Yeah.
you give them all 4 and they pass with a 5.0, you're done. They're good.
I'm done. They don't have to take the access.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
You've given all 4 domains and they've shown their proficiency in all 4 domains.
Do you have to give it all 4 now? Or remember a few years back, we could give it in
Yes.
December and all that. Does it have to
Yes.
be now or
It
what?
has to be all at the same time. You
All
can't
at the same
split it
time.
up.
Okay.
Because
Thank
they've
you.
normed it for a single administration. They haven't
Sure.
normed it for splitting it because you'd be doing it at different times of the year and they would have improved.
Sure. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah. Okay, so for the second semester, kindergarten through first grade, again, they have to have that 5.0 overall to be identified as LEPRCB or less than 5.0, I'm sorry. And then second grade through 12th grade, again, 5.0 overall would be the cut score for them as well. All right. Some other useful information, notifications for parents. When we talked about they have to be sent out, you have to include in your notification that the student is eligible for service and the method of delivery. So what kind of service you're going to offer. You have to tell them the student's level of proficiency and how you assessed it. How the program is going to help your child learn English and meet the academic achievement standards. And then the specific requirements for exiting the program so that we will assess every year until they reach that 4.7. So those are things that have to be in that letter that goes out to parents. Okay. We also need to make sure that they know they have the right to opt out of the type of program that's being offered. So parents cannot opt out of services totally, but they can opt out of the type of service that is provided by the school. When a parent opts out of services, that does not release the school district from their obligation to serve the students. So the student still needs to have some sort of program in place where they work on students' goals, whether it be through coaching the classroom teacher or providing some professional development for the teacher or providing resources for the classroom teacher. But there still has to be some way of checking in, and the student still is assessed every year until they reach a 4.7. Also, the notification of services has to be sent out to parents every year until they reach that 4.7. So even if they opted out one year, we assess the students at the end of the year, you send out another report to the parents saying your child still qualifies for services, or they've met the criteria to exit at this time. But either way, you notify them and give them the option to come into the program or let them know that the student no longer requires the assessment. Then any student who does exit the program and is on monitor status for those 2 years, they can be reassessed for program placement and pulled back in if you feel that they're unable to keep up with their peers due to language issues. So students on 2-year monitoring can be pulled back into the program. And you can find more information about the identification and placement on the DESE EL assessment webpage, and that's linked here on this page. All right, so who can give the screener test? So the test administrators must be district employees and meet at least the para requirement of 60 hours. And they have to complete the WIDA online training for the test that they will be administering. So if they're only administering the kindergarten assessment, they only have to go through that training. They don't have to go through the full battery. So the people who are giving the assessments also do not have to be EL teachers. You can designate any teachers or any employees who work full-time for your school to help give these assessments. Some districts don't realize that they can be other people other than your EL teachers. Again, they have to complete the entire training course for the screeners that they are going to be given or giving. And a complete list of the required trainings is available on the WIDA secure portal under EL assessments. Your school district employees who are going to be administering these tests have to go through this training at least once. So they have to, if they haven't had the training before, they have to complete it. Then it's up to your district how often they need to be retested. So when you go through the training, you complete it, and then there is an assessment that you have to pass with at least 80% to be certified to administer this assessment. It's a good idea to go through the training every year, but we don't require that at DESE, but your district can make that decision. And if they do any updates to the screeners, then that should be gone through as well. Something new from WIDA, they are now updating the screeners and doing all of the new materials over the summer. And they will be available every year on July 1st in the secure portal. So if they've made any adjustments or any changes to the screeners, that information will be in the portal by July 1st of each year. Okay. So once you've identified and screened your students, then we're on to the next step, setting up a program. And that's where we come into the Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, or the Equal Educational Opportunities Act. And this is kind of the basis of your LAU plan, your EL plan, your language instruction educational program plan. So whatever you want to call it, it's basically your LAU plan. And every school district should have a plan in place that covers these topics. They need to talk about when they're going to identify and screen their students or their potential students, how they're going to provide services, who's going to be providing the services, and the types of services that are provided. So this is all part of, again, what should be in your LAU plan or your EL plan for your district. And we covered this, I think last year or the year before. If you want to go back and look at some of our past check-ins, you'll find we did it over 3 months, I believe, and more in depth. So you can look into that more deeply. But the next thing I wanted to talk about was a study that was done by the Department of Education. And what they were talking about were pathways and labels, how we how we identify the students to give them a label, what we call them. And we create those labels to help meet the needs of the students. So we identify them and put them into categories for how we need to serve them. They're meant to be administrative, as it says here, but sometimes they add with them a stigma and discrimination that sets the pathways in one way or another. Sometimes we put them in a tracking situation that doesn't help them reach their potential. And sometimes the tracks we put them in are kind of second-class schooling, and we want to make sure we don't fall into that category. The ways that we label our English learners vary. We have some that are based on how they participate in a program like ELs or heritage language learners or newcomer students. And then some are based on their placement of the pathway that we're going to give them. If we have a dual language school, if they are initially fluent English proficient students, we don't use that one much here in Missouri. So they come in initially fluent in English, but there may be some other needs that they have. Or they might be long-term English learners or reclassified as fluent English proficient or former English learners. So the services we provide them or how we look at them differs, is determined by the pathway that they have. And then some of the labels are dependent on their background or their characteristics, like emergent bilinguals or multilingual learners or indigenous English learners or recently arrived English learners or our SLIFE and SIFE. So how we identify them a lot is based on the purpose of that identification, that label. So how they're classified helps to determine the kinds of services and resources that they have, the knowledge the teachers need to work with them and skills and how they prepare. It's also determined by their English proficiency level. Their age and grade sometimes plays into it, and the language of instruction plays into it. So what language they have and how we're going to be teaching. Dual language has a different impact. So we think of all of these things as moderators because they moderate the ways that impacts the student's learning. And unfortunately, sometimes the EL tracking and the course tracking has some negative effects, like leveled classes. Sometimes our students don't get into them because of their English language development labels. Or sometimes they don't get into some of the courses and the electives that we might because they're put in EL classes. And so maybe they don't get to take shop or they don't get to take art, which is unfortunate. And then sometimes they're in parallel classes where they're sheltered or bilingual or co-taught, which is a better alternative. So we have to look at all of those things when we are determining how we're going to put students into coursework. So we have different pathways. This is a study that was done by Molly Faulkner Bond. She is the research director at WestEd, and she did a several-year study where she looked at research done by several different states and organizations and groups. And so they looked at students who entered an EL program in kindergarten most often, and they tracked those kindergartners over time. And they were trying to determine the different pathways that they took or how long it took them to be reclassified. And so they looked at students, again, who started in kindergarten, how long it took them until they exited. They also looked at students who came later and how long it took them to reclassify. And then sometimes they had students who entered the program and then just disappeared and were no longer in their programs, and how that impacted their information. And then they looked at this in a different way. They looked per grade level. So within a grade level, you would have like our student A here, who is in the middle of their career at third grade. They've been in for 3 years and they don't reclassify for another 3 years. And then student B, they've been in since kindergarten and they're going to be in until 11th grade. And then student D, they're in their first year as an English learner. So we've got student F then who started in kindergarten and they're already ready to be reclassified by third grade. So when we're talking to others about our English learners, we want to make sure that they're aware that this is all evident in one grade level. I mean, they're not all the same. And this is a conversation I had with our Office of Quality Schools, because when they created our charts, they were looking at all the students coming in at a same level. And when they're developing those, and that's just not the case with our English learners. And as EL educators, we know that they're all over the place. So this is a nice chart to kind of develop with your students to get an idea of how long they've been in the program and when they came into the program and what your student demographics look like in your district. And it might help others to see the variability within your district and give them an idea of why what we're doing is sometimes a difficult task. But anyway, they did this study and they looked at these students over time to get a better idea of what it takes to reclassify the students or what could be expected. And you can look at the same with different grade levels there. So here's what they found. Well, and this is a video that was put together about designing your language program. I'm gonna let you look at that later. It came out from the REL as well. Oops, I don't want us to do that. Get my screen to stop. There we go. Okay. So these are some things that they found from this. They have to systematically examine and address the students' content access. They have to look at their participation in other programs, how well their teachers have been taught how to work with English learners through PD or collaboration. And they need to look at the data of ELs who have left the program and different subgroups of our English learners. So look at the big picture, not just at your scores. When we're looking at that, there are some warning signs and some things that you need to take into consideration. They found that if you have students who are failing courses, that's a good indicator that you need to look at your program. Or if they're having to repeat courses a lot, or if when they come to the end of their educational career, if they're missing core content areas in their schedule, or they have incomplete schedules, or they're put in a lot of non-credit bearing courses or remedial type courses, or if their progress to graduation is slow, or if you find that your students are absent a lot or disengaged, or if your teachers aren't knowledgeable on how to work with them. Again, if you're looking at just the ELs and not those other subgroups, those are all warning signs that you need to look at your program and improve your program because, we'll look at LTELs first. So they looked specifically at LTELs as an example. For one, LTELs, we don't have a federal definition for what an LTEL is. So there's no statewide definition for LTELs. Each state themselves has to set the maximum timeline to proficiency, and that varies from state to state. Most range between 5 years and 8 years. In Missouri, we say 6 years, we expect a student to be proficient. But states have to report every year the number of English learners who are not proficient after receiving 5 or more years of service. And so that's part of our EL indicator every year. And this is something they found by looking at, through this national study, they found that from 2014 to 2020, the number in kindergarten through 3rd grade is starting to decrease as far as number of students. So from 2014 to 2020 in kindergarten, in 2014, we had a lot more kindergartners who were identified as English learners than we did in 2020. And that was consistent, again, through 3rd grade. But once they hit 4th grade on to 12th grade, they've seen an increase of number of English learners in the program in those grades. So we have a decrease from kindergarten to 3rd grade, and we're starting to see an increase from 4th grade to 12th grade. And so they were really concerned and wondering why that switch, why has that changed? Is it because we have students now who have been in the country and don't need those services at a younger age, or what is it? So that was kind of the impetus for the study to go further for them. So they looked at those students again who started in kindergarten, and they were trying to determine how long it took them to reclassify. And what they found was, regardless of how long the students were in a program, no matter if they were in the program to high school, started in kindergarten and didn't leave until high school, each group had a fourth of the students who never reclassified. So that means a fourth of those students were long-term English learners, no matter which group they looked at, whether it was the smaller group size or the larger group size. In each group, 1/4 of them never reclassified and were considered long-term English learners. So what they found was that growth that we see from like 4th grade and up, it was more due to students who got stuck in EL status than an increase in the number of students enrolling in those grades. So we had students enrolling in those grades all along, but now we are having fewer and fewer of them who are exiting, who are being determined to be long-term English learners. And in their study, they said that this term, long-term English learners, we're kind of using that as a student who's falling down and short and not progressing the way they should. But instead, we need to be looking at it as the system that's falling down and not serving the students the way we should. And this kind of goes back to something I've said for many years. When we get our students to a level 3.0, we have a lot of schools who quit offering them as many services. And that should not be the case, because when they get to that 3.0, they're not at a place where they are able to be successful in the classroom yet. They still need support. And so if we're not offering that support and we're limiting our services to them when they get to that level, this study is kind of proving that we're not doing them the service we need to. We need to make sure that we're meeting their needs as well. So I thought that was very interesting. Some systemic and considerations that they put forth in the study, they said they may be due to lack of rigor or quality in the EL services. They might be because we failed to identify some learning or cognitive disabilities in the students, or the students may be in a dual language program that goes over time. So it's not that there's a problem, it's just a longer participation model. They also looked at parents who opt their children out of services and how that affects this. And then one of the things that they kind of really looked at was, are the exit criteria, is the exit criteria too stringent? Are we being too hard on students? So that's something they're looking at the federal level to see, maybe our standards are, our expectations are set too high. And then again, we have all seen this in classrooms. Is there disinterest or lack of engagement when they take those assessments? So how can we make that a better process? So those are all things that they're looking at. There's also a new research focus that the federal government is backing and funding, where they're looking at the processes that they put in place a few years ago, like the standardization under ESSA, that they want everyone to be doing the same thing so they have a better picture of progress that way. And did that happen? Are we actually doing that in our states? They also want to look at the impact of entrance and exit criteria, the classification. Are we classifying the right kids for services? And are we exiting them at the right time? So those are things they're looking at. And then they're looking at the relationship between the state and district policies. Are districts implementing what the state's putting out and following through on that? So those are the focuses of the new study that they're getting ready to do. And then reflecting on everything that I took out of this federal study that they did, labels matter. What we call our students affects how we see them and how they see themselves. And then the pathways also matter. So making sure that we provide the right opportunities to affect their academic achievement. And then sometimes the labels and the pathways interact. So we want to make sure that their labels don't get in the way of where they're going. And as always, we say this all the time, an asset orientation helps. We want to make sure that we talk about what they can do and what they're capable of. And then looking at this from the student's perspective, how would they feel about being labeled with some of those terms? So maybe we use the label in our paperwork, but we really don't put the label on the student. We label the program and things, but we try not to label the students as much as we do. All right. There are two really good publications that were put out by Rel West. One is an asset-based approach to multilingual terminology. So giving an idea of how we can better use terminology when working with our students. And the other one is those systemic factors that shape their educational opportunities and outcomes. So it walks you through some of the different things that we can do that were discussed in this presentation on how we can work through those within our districts and our schools to provide a better opportunity for our students and better outcomes for the students. All right, that is all I have to share. I want to make sure that you're aware that we have regional male personnel that can come and help you. They're there to meet your needs and to help you walk through some of the challenges that you come across working with your students, and they're just a phone call or an email away. So please contact them. And then all of this is found in our hub and will be recorded and available for a later date. So you can go back and watch it as many times as you like. All right, I am going to stop sharing the screen and allow you to ask any questions if you have any. And I'm going to stop talking. Any questions? Use my teacher wait time here. There are no questions, then we'll go ahead and end our session for today. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.